everybody. I am Marina and I'm your host at Unbossed. Unbossed is a podcast I've created to highlight women with amazing paths of success here in Chicago. Last year, I set out to interview the only 40 female CTOs in the city, and this year I've expanded to female CEOs and women in politics and government in Chicago. I'm excited to share these interviews with you, and I hope you contact me at www.unbossed.io or email me at marina@unbossed.io. Hope to see you soon.
Lakshmi Shenoy is the CEO of Embark Collective, the innovation hub in downtown Tampa that helps Tampa Bay startup talent build bold, scalable, thriving companies. Before moving to Tampa Bay, Lakshmi was in Chicago and served as the Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at 1871, the #1 university-affiliated business incubator in the world. Prior to 1871, Lakshmi worked at Profit, Brand Strategy, Time Inc., Procter & Gamble, and Leo Burnett. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from the University of Chicago and an MBA from the Harvard Business School. Lakshmi currently serves on the board of the Florida Aquarium and Junior Achievement Tampa Bay. Welcome, Lakshmi.
Hey, everybody. This is Marina, your podcast host at Unbossed. Today with me, I have Lakshmi Shenoy, CEO at Embark Collective. Welcome, Lakshmi.
Thanks for having me, Marina.
Thanks for joining me. I'm excited to have you on. We were connected by a company called Propeller, and I'll talk about that later in the podcast. But, and if you guys hear my baby in the background, it's because I have a baby. So, life in quarantine, this is what happens. I am excited to have you on because you were part of a fundamental company here in Chicago, which is 1871. We'll get into that. But before that, I know you're a CEO. You have an extensive professional background. I'm super impressed and I want to ask you everything about it. But tell me a little bit about growing up in Chicago. How was it? And kind of like, who was Lakshmi as a little girl?
Yeah, Lakshmi as a little girl, sometimes I feel like I need to apologize to my parents because I was a very energetic, curious child that probably was very, very exhausting along the way. But I came from a household that had my father, who passed away in 2017. He was a physicist at Argonne Lab and started something called the Advanced Photon Source, which is this amazing X-ray source that scientists from around the world use. So you've got this physicist father, and complemented by my dear mother, who is a retired librarian. She's a writer. She's also an astrologer. So you put that together and you just have this variety of topics being discussed in a home, as well as just a variety, very different ways of thinking. And so if you looked at me today, it becomes very logical that you are the product of the physicist and the astrologer. And so I sort of toe that line of right and left brained, which is, I've tried to turn it into an advantage. But as a child, that just meant that I was exposed to a lot of conversations, a lot of topics, a lot of things that were totally over my head. But you just got comfortable with not fully understanding and knowing that you'll figure it out as you continue to listen. So I tend to be somebody who does listen very well, just because I am trying to absorb as much information as I can, and I attribute that to my family and to the love of learning that they instilled in me. And that has become, I think, a core, an identifying part of my personal brand, is that I am just this voracious learner. It sometimes manifests as like a voracious reader, but it's not the only way that I'm consuming information. So I don't know. It just means that I grew up as a nerd and I never outgrew it.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. I think nerd is fashionable right now. So I think you're in.
Nerds are having their moment, and I'm not going to let it go.
Nerds are ruling the world, apparently. So how does this like astrologist side and physicist side show up in like real life?
Yes, it's let me try to think of an example of how that manifests. So let's just think about like something like decision making, and in my day I'm making a zillion decisions every day. And I just had a conversation actually with a venture fund located down here in Florida, and we were talking about making a decision about a new hire. And they asked me, how would you approach doing this? And I said, you know what I would do is I would identify what are the criteria for how to make the decision, and I would force myself to numerically rank where that candidate fell on that decision. So you've got this way to really weight how each of the different criteria are impacting what you think about the candidate. And then I said, what I would next do is once I've gone through that exercise, very analytical, very logical, what I would do is then go to sleep and sleep on the decision and wake up in the morning. And if the decision feels good in your gut, go with it. And if not, you've made your decision that you're not going to go with it. And so it's that mix of like, let's root it in logic, but ultimately, let your gut still have a role in the process if the way that you've constructed the logic isn't actually maybe properly collecting the full story you are trying to collect in order to make that decision. So I think that's a good example of just like, you got to just marry those two things together and figure out and let one help you figure it out. Otherwise, you don't really know what to meditate on when you're going to sleep. Like, is this the right candidate? And it's like, well, based on these decisions, these factors, yes or no, the logic says yes, but my gut says no. Honestly, I'm going to go with the gut in that case.
Yeah, totally. And it feels very appropriate for startup land, which is parenthesis to the audience. Want to give us a quick thing about Embark Collective and what you're doing right now?
Absolutely. I mean, for this audience, and we'll get to it, but I was at 1871 for 4 years prior to starting Embark Collective. So think about Embark Collective is basically a flavor or version of 1871, a startup hub based in Tampa, Florida. So that's where I lived. I moved from Chicago in 2018 down to Florida to build what became Embark Collective. So we take a lot of the same attributes of 1871, and then I sort of mixed in a lot of the hindsight that I got to develop, in my time at 1871 to make Embark Collective right for the region that it was serving, as well as right for a leader like me, and this is the vision I wanted to manifest for this community.
Yeah, beautiful. And so going back to like the logic and gut, right? How do you apply that also or how do you think it could be applied to a startup?
Yeah.
And Embark as well, as a startup potentially.
Absolutely. And we are very much a startup. We really, we got started with what I consider our beta test in March of 2019. We had all of the elements for value proposition in place in January of 2020. So we're really new as we get going. So we're a startup for startups by all measures. And in terms of that logic and gut, there is no better example of how do you try to navigate your way forward without complete information than trying to build a startup. When you are going through the process, you're trying to collect as much information as possible, but sometimes it's just the fact that you're building a technology that's never existed before in the world, or maybe it's that you're building a company for the first time. But whatever it is, every experience in building a startup really exacerbates sort of the blind spots that you have as a founder building something new as a new builder. It's just everything around it is new and lack of complete information. And so what I try to do in both the startup of Embark Collective, as well as now we serve close to 100 early stage companies here. And so in a lot of the work that I'm doing with them, I use that same technique that I shared earlier around, let's create a framework for how to digest the information that we do have. And, so in a lot of cases, if we're making a decision, it is about identifying what criteria are critical for us to consider to make our decision. And what that does is it creates alignment with everybody that's a part of that decision. And then taking whatever information that you have access to, and figuring out how can you assess that against your criteria. But then you have to take a step back and you can say, like, but I've never done this before, or we really have incomplete customer information. And so you have to take a step back and think about just logically what I've done in this framework of setting forth criteria and put the information I do have against that criteria, has developed a set of hypotheses. Then you just have to think, like, as a rational being, do these hypotheses make sense?
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll say, like, even though all of the information I have does lead me to this one decision or one assessment, like, it just doesn't make any sense. And even if you go forth and test that idea, not knowing that, like, this is one that I expect to disprove, and just having that self-awareness really about the work that you're doing is really critical. So that's how I blend the sort of that right and left-brained mechanism into startup life, where you're doing the best you can with such little information on how to proceed forward.
I feel like we've gotten a really cool view of you right now from this framework perspective.
Yeah.
And how you operate in life in general.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my gosh. You should see me at the grocery store. I'm like with my list, but then I'm like, but I'm feeling Nutella.
That's awesome. Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I have a list. Sometimes I don't. I just go. I just go with it. But I read in an interview, like, before we go into, I want to get to 1871 in a second, but before we get to that, I read in one of the interviews that you had that it took you a little bit of time to figure out, it sounded like it took you a little bit of time to figure out what you were really wanting to do.
Yeah.
You want to say as a grown-up or in life, whatever that statement was.
Yeah.
And you finally feel like perhaps you realize now in your role, which is amazing. What was that journey of figuring it out for you? For people that are like going through the same emotions, right? Like they're like trying to figure out what their thing is.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's interesting. So I'll just give you a quick, I'll give you the 30-second resume download so that people can get context into what you're talking about. So I was fortunate to go to college at the University of Chicago, and coming out of that with a sociology degree, I was like, well, what do you do with a sociology degree? And then my amazing thesis advisor was like, you obviously go get a PhD. And I was thinking, after that many years of schooling, I was like, do I need to go get more? And it was my sister who, again, you're not going to be surprised. She said, well, you're sort of the mix of business aptitude and creativity, so you should go into advertising. And so I followed that guidance, and I had this ability to it was an incredible opportunity to intern at Leo Burnett in downtown Chicago, and that eventually turned into a full-time role. So I got to work in advertising. And that was interesting because I was able to flex some of my creativity, but I wasn't a creative. I wasn't dubbed as a creative. And that was actually just like felt off to me. It wasn't quite the right fit. And so I went to I decided to go to graduate school. I was debating between getting a master's in fine arts or a master's in business administration. It's actually easier to go get an MBA than, I know, totally
Very
different
different.
worlds. But this is who I am. I am a product of my parents. And so I ended up going to business school. I went to Harvard, moved to Boston. After that, I knew that I didn't want to do something like consulting or banking, partially because I'm terrible at the banking stuff, and on the consulting front, I just didn't want to be part of a class. I like standing out. I like to sort of be my own person and set my own pace and that sort of thing. Um, and and despite being really competitive, I didn't want to compete, if that makes any sense. But I had this amazing opportunity at Time Inc., the magazine company in New York, where I was doing corporate strategy. So again, I'm next to the creatives, but I am not dubbed as the creative. So once again, you're sort of in the situation where you're like, what are you doing? And I was also in New York, and New York is not Chicago, and I wanted to come home because Chicago is an amazing place.
Yeah.
And so even though I was not confident in my abilities to be strong in consulting, I did then move to consulting and worked for an amazing brand strategy firm. So again, right between the creatives and the business orientedness of it all. And I did that for a few years. And what I think I've realized is that creativity is really just, I was trying to group it into, is it my ability to write? Is it my ability to sort of create that artistic vision? That was how I was thinking about creativity. And what I realized is that my creativity is really channeled into being really good at building things. And that in and of itself is an art. And so I saw when 1871 opened in 2012, I read the article about it opening in probably Cranes or wherever, and I remember thinking at that point, like, I want to be a part of that organization at some point. And then I sort of thought about it and put it away and never thought about it again because I was, doing my thing in the consulting world. And then in 2014, there was this, I found the opportunity and built in Chicago. It was an online posting for a job at 1871. And I was ready to leave consulting. I sort of knew that I had done what I could there and knew that it wasn't the best use of my skills. Like I was working super hard in consulting just to be an okay consultant. I wanted to be able to work super hard in something to be really good at something.
Yeah.
And so I took a chance, and that was how I ended up at 1871. The thing that's interesting in retrospect is that I was entrepreneurial the entire way through all of that.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot of changes. There's a lot of building your own path, right?
For sure. I used to run a website from 2005 to 2011 called Gastronomic Bypass. And it was, I reviewed Chicago restaurants. I think I reviewed over 200 Chicago restaurants. And I think in like 2007, it was in Chicago Magazine as a top What Chicago website. It was like one of the biggest deals for me early in my career because I built that from scratch. And that was truly just me writing about food in Chicago. Is there anything better?
Yeah.
And so, and then I even think back to my childhood where, my friends in the neighborhood, we would just build businesses as like fix-your-olds. And you just, our target market was our neighborhood. So we would go door to door and sell the nonsense that we were coming up with. Some of it was nonsense. Some of it was very, very good. We went around the neighborhood and asked for money to save the rainforest, and then we produced a newsletter which we gave to everybody who donated. So we were like very on top of our sort of how do we do nonprofit development early on.
Well, newsletter are back, so you were you were ahead of time.
ahead of time. We probably plagiarized all of the articles that we wrote because we were too young to realize that that was wrong. But we did our best, and I think we were able to donate money to protect, I think, like a quarter acre of the rainforest in Paraguay. So, thanks to me and my young friends growing up, hopefully the earth can stay a little bit greener.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, going back to your entrepreneurial professional development, if you were to meet yourself back at the beginning,
Yeah.
you're starting a little brunette and you meet yourself back there, what would you tell yourself?
I would actually tell myself, learn everything you can from these experiences, because you're going to use them in 15 years. Or now unfortunately it's longer than that. But I would not tell myself jump into entrepreneurship right away. There was a lot I needed to learn about how to operate in the business world. And that's something that I see every day, where I work with a whole variety of founders with different levels of professional experience. And I think the biggest return on personal investment is to go somewhere, do really good work, and be trained on how to function in the business world, before you try to go do it on your own and sort of be the brand that is probably will stand for a whole slew of different things, but hopefully professionalism is one of them. So it's just much easier if you early in your career can take that time. So I would just say to myself, like, this is not forever, and take advantage of this moment and be a sponge and learn as much as you can, and try to be exposed to as many experiences as possible while you are sort of in the hands of another person, a manager, an organization, whatever it is, so that you are truly prepared when you go at it alone.
Nice. Amazing. And looking back now to that experience, like you said, it brought you into where you are now at Embark Collective. Can you tell us a little bit about, and we chatted about this a little bit, or we mentioned it when we were just getting to know each other, but like, how do you see the difference of markets between what 1871 is doing right now in Chicago and Embark Collective and other founding institutes in Tampa or Florida, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's been really interesting to reflect on Chicago being in a different place, and I think that the experience in Florida right now is probably similar to any smaller city that is really working to find ways to attract talent and retain talent, and knowing that startup growth is really the number one way to create net new jobs in the US. Like, it makes a lot of sense for communities to make this investment in this type of support infrastructure. And what I am guessing is that we right now in Florida are where Chicago was several years ago, probably even before when 1871 started. And right now we are really working on creating the funnel and making sure that we have a large volume of startups, so that at least a few of them can come through the funnel and be a success story on the other end.
How do you do that?
It is about, how do you remove barriers to letting people start businesses? Starting a business is hard. We all know that. Any entrepreneur listening to this experiences this every minute of the day. And there's a million reasons to say no to doing this. How do we try to mitigate some of those reasons to say no and give people the opportunity to say yes to building solutions that matter to the world. And if we start early, I'm talking idea stage in terms of creating the right support so that people can see, like, is there anything there with this idea? I think that's from my perspective. How do you fill that funnel? Chicago, just by sheer population and being at this effort longer, and really smart investments that the community has made in itself to enable this growth to start to happen within entrepreneurship, just has a vastly larger population of entrepreneurs. That is something I miss. And it's been really interesting to work to get people to say yes to entrepreneurship, specifically tech or tech enabled entrepreneurship, early on. So I think in a lot of ways, Chicago is a few years ahead. There's plenty of opportunities that I see for the community, especially now with this new perspective. It was totally different for me when I was like right in the thick of it. Now, when you take a step away, you're able to just see more opportunity, which is exciting. I mean, to me, I'm really bullish. I continue to be incredibly bullish on the potential of Chicago's startup community. Because it's already proven so much in such a short amount of time.
Yes.
And secondly, like, I feel like the engine is just getting started.
Absolutely. Yes. We just had Betsy on, and I think that's worth mentioning because she is leading 1871 right now. And you guys didn't cross paths, I believe, but she's leading 1871 right now, and they serve hundreds of startups. So yes. that is really cool. What is when I think about Florida and I think about Chicago, I wonder about diversity.
Yeah.
And I wonder about if you've noticed or if you've seen differences, similarities between the startup community in Chicago versus the one in Florida around diversity.
Such a good and important question, and one that I am dedicating a whole lot of effort to. It's been interesting. I mean, I think as I mentioned before, our goal is how do we remove the obstacles from allowing people to say yes to entrepreneurship. That's not organic, and that's, I think, the thing that we saw in Chicago, and 1871 has taken a very deliberate effort to make sure that we are fixing some of the we're opening more doors and fixing some of the bad habits of just, if you build it, they will come. Well, who is they who is going to come? And how do we make sure that they is representative of the community that we live in?
Yes.
And I got to be a part of efforts like launching Wisdom, the women's program at 1871. That was an amazing heavy lift to get off the ground, but we did it. Same goes for the Latinx incubator with the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Those were things that launched while I was at 1871, and Betsy has done so much more, yes. Which is amazing to watch. I had the benefit of realizing very early into Embark Collective's existence that if we just let the growth happen organically, it is not going to reflect the community in which we live in. And so what we realized as a team, as we were looking at what are the demographics of Embark Collective's community, and then realizing, wait, we have a total disconnect of what this initial membership looks like and what the Tampa Bay or Florida community looks like.
Yeah.
We realized that you have to do the work. Yeah. You have to go and invite people to sit at your table if you want to make sure that it looks like your community. And so that has been something that I've really reinforced to our team, is that if we want to see, if this is the future that we want to see, it is going to take sheer force, brute force to make this happen. And we need to be the ones doing the work. And we need to be the ones that model the behavior. So our team needs to look like what we want every team to look like. And we need to figure out ways to, from a founder perspective, allow more people to be able to say yes to entrepreneurship, and from a team perspective, making sure that we are revisiting what is the profile of a good tech startup teammate, and how do we acknowledge the differences that we all come to the table with, and how do we sort of just get out of our own way about like just copying and pasting, like here's the job description, and you have to have a 4-year degree, and you have to have 3 years of experience in tech before I'm going to allow you to, like, let's get more creative and think about what are we really looking for in a candidate, and how do we open up the pipeline so that we can consider more people that just may have a different background but actually could probably do the job better.
Absolutely. And for the ones who are listening and not on video, I'm shaking my head because Lakshmi is very much on point with everything she's saying. I'm totally agreeing with this. It has to be intentional. I think that's where it comes from, and it cannot just be left to chance to create this type of diversity that we want to see.
The other thing I'll add is that I've become very comfortable with saying we are doing the work, but we are still not there. I think there is a predisposition, almost just like a point of pride to say, like, we're doing all this stuff and look at what we've been able to do from it. I'll be the first to say, like, it takes a lot of effort, and my where I want to be, we are still far from that. And just being honest about that and not trying to deny it or sort of sugarcoat the situation. And then I think the other thing that I've realized, and this is just from building my own team, is it takes continuous work. There's never a moment where you're done. And
Absolutely.
so that's been the thing where, I you recruit your team and you're like, great, I love the team and who we are, and then some change happens, somebody gets an amazing opportunity, and you're like, oh my God, wait, and so just it requires always. They say, as specifically for running a startup, like, you always have to be recruiting talent, and it's so true for many reasons. But ensuring that you are creating a diverse and inclusive culture in your team is a really top reason for why you always have to be recruiting.
Nice. Amazing. What was it like going from Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at 1871 to becoming CEO of your own company? And how did that happen for you?
Absolutely. Goodness. So when I was at 1871, I had the great opportunity to work with Howard Tolman, who was the CEO of 1871. I got to work with Tom Alexander, who was the COO of 1871. And so I was very much sort of a behind the scenes doer. Like, I am really good at executing, and that's sort of what I did when I was at 1871, and I got to really be able to complement a lot of the work that Howard's a visionary, and I was able to complement a lot of the work that he was putting forward, and just sort of take the ball and run with it when we were building. And so that's a very different experience than being at the helm. And when I was being recruited for this role in Tampa, I was actually, I was being recruited for a CEO role, but I came to the table and I said, I really think of myself more as a COO, because I am not the person that wants to be front and center selling the vision day after day. I'm much better operating and executing and sort of making the engine run. And it was actually the chairman of the board that was doing the recruiting from Florida that said, we don't agree. We think you'd be a great CEO. And so it actually took somebody else's confidence in me to allow me to make, because I'm, the physicist side of my brain is still very linear in that you go from vice president of strategy to, the first leadership role, which would have been the chief operating officer, then to a CEO. And so to me, it was sort of leapfrogging. Like, do I have all the skills? And it's all of the stereotypes that we talk about, or not stereotypes. They're not stereotypes because they're, well, it's just, you have too many conversations with women about
their limiting beliefs.
Yeah, and their confidence in themselves, and reading a job opportunity and saying I don't click off or hit every single bullet point, and that was me to a T. And so it just required somebody else to say, like, you're wrong, you're fine for this, you can do this, and that's how I ended up in this CEO role, and it's been an amazing growth experience. I mean, think about the fact that I went from an organization like 1871, serving 500 companies, downtown Chicago, already built, just doing a lot of work, to going to ground zero with all of this. Step one, of building an organization from scratch. Everything from the nonprofit status to the brand to the team to the members to the building, everything was stuff that I had to build. And so it's also just, it's not just a transition from going from vice president to CEO, it's going from team member to founder, and entrepreneur, building from scratch. And so the amazing thing is that I found out that my natural skill set really lends itself to this world, and I've never felt more comfortable in my skin before until now. I mean, I think now I am actually doing the work that I am good at doing, and naturally inclined to do. So it took a while to figure out, and it required all of those other experiences, because I wouldn't have been able to do this without all of the other experiences I had beforehand.
And what a great opportunity to relate.
Yeah.
To the community, the startups that you're serving.
Absolutely. I mean, and to be fair, it makes me credible.
Yes.
I'm building alongside other builders. And so when we talk about leadership challenges, team challenges, board challenges, cash flow challenges, all of those things, we get each other. And it's not me talking from more of like an abstract, theoretical point of view. It's like, no, I experienced this yesterday, so let's talk about it.
That's amazing. Well, I feel like this is a great place to like tell you that we're almost at time. And I know it happens suddenly, and it comes up. But I usually have a few last questions that I ask all my guests, and they're very fun. So here we go. What is one thing that we don't know about you that you want to share?
I am an introvert, so despite the fact that
That
I
is surprising.
spend all my time with people, I really, really relish in time by myself.
I'm the same way. I feel like, like they say, like everybody's a little bit of both, but I tend to feel very comfortable in my introvert side. So
Exactly.
I understand.
Especially after a pandemic, I'm like introvert all day.
I understand that. Is there a book, a resource, or a podcast, something else that you've gifted or give away the most that you want to recommend to the audience?
I have two. So for leadership, there's a book by Shellye Archambeau called Unapologetically Ambitious. She got to speak with members of Embark Collective, and she's just amazing.
Nice.
CEO, powerhouse, learn from her. And then the second book that I give to many startup founders is called The Mom Test. And it's really about how do you get customer feedback in a way that's actually helpful to achieving product market fit.
Oh, that's amazing. I'll definitely read that one. Both of them, actually. I like to read. I don't know if you can tell, but I love to read. So I'm super into getting new recommendations for books.
Fabulous.
What is a book you would write? And if you don't have any ideas, I think I can give you
Actually, I'd rather hear your idea on this.
one. Well, I really like that thing that you said about the framework.
Yeah.
And going with your gut. So I totally
Yeah.
can see a book coming from that.
Oh my God, I can only imagine like the counter perspectives when people are like, and why do the research if you're just gonna go with your gut at the end?
I know, it would
All
spark
of
a lot
that.
of interest. It would be like the perfect like left right book, you know,
Yeah,
like where are you leaning more of and where do you need to do more work on which side.
absolutely.
But what else did you have in mind?
You know, I don't know if it's funny because I write so much, but I don't know if I have a book inside of me again to write. So I'm gonna use your framework idea and go with that.
That's awesome. What do you write about?
So right now I write a little bit about sort of the founder experience
Yeah.
and you know, what it is to build a startup. I end up writing a lot about, you know, why Florida is why it's growing as a startup market just because of the role I'm in right now. And then I told you before, my passion is around food. And so I have this this website that's deep in WordPress. I mean, I gave up the URL a while ago, and it's essentially a fledgling. It just sits there now, but there's 200 reviews of Chicago restaurants that. For me, writing about food is poetry. I love it so much, and I had thought about some of those restaurants are gone, and so it's an amazing way to just remember great food even if the restaurant no longer exists, and
Wow.
paying homage to the restaurants that have left or have not have had to close in Chicago. I think that could be, it's almost like an obituary to amazing food.
I was
That'll be
gonna
my
say
book.
like yeah, that sounds like a really great book of poetry around.
Here's all the restaurants that are not here. Let's remember them and thank them for the experiences that we had while they were here.
That sounds like a great. I probably would definitely read that if it included some recipes because
Yeah,
like might as
absolutely.
well just like learn how to make the food for sure.
For sure.
What is the WordPress blog that you're
Oh my
writing?
God, it's gastronomicbypass.wordpress.com.
So you
All
use
of a sudden, we're gonna start. They're like, wait, it went from 0 hits for the last 7 years to one person reading it now.
did you have did you I thought you said you gave up the URL. Is somebody else running it now?
No, no, I mean I just let it expire.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. That GoDaddy game.
Nice. Okay, so now that we figure out what book you would write. um, Anything you want the audience to remember? If there was one thing for people who are starting their own company or they're going through their journey of figuring out their professional career and what they want to do, is there any advice that you like to remind yourself of that you can share with the audience?
I think for anyone who is in an experience where they're thinking like feeling anxious about like, is this the right place for me right now? I think having the confidence to know that not every opportunity has to be forever. I mean, I think the now people jump from job to job just so frequently, and I think in the time you're in a job, think about how do I maximize the return on investment of time. And you do that by giving everything you have to the opportunity so you can get everything out of it as well. And so I think really just like recognizing like in this present moment, I have the opportunity to learn and I'm going to take advantage of it versus letting myself sort of, the way I equate it to be is you either are you shouldn't be letting life happen to you. You need to make your life happen. And so taking that point of view of I have agency in the moment, even if it's not the job that I've been desiring, I, I still am the actor in my life, and can get out something out of this moment.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Lakshmi, for being on my podcast. And I hope to see you soon again here in the future. I'm excited to see you in Chicago. Whenever you come, please call me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marina.
Have a good day. Bye.